Allow me to introduce myself.
I am the last sane sports fan.
I am a genius by trade.
I just knew too much. Does that make me crazy? Does that make me crazy? Does that make me crazy? Possibly.
Hello, everyone, and welcome once again to The View from the Midwest. It's time for another Monday morning quarterback edition, even though I usually post these in the evening, but Monday evening quarterback just doesn't sound quite as right. Let's jump right into it yesterday with the NFL action going on. Some of the Midwestern teams that ended up getting victories, but a lot of them didn't necessarily look all that great in doing so. We'll start off with the Colts. They beat the Jaguars in a AFC South matchup. That was obviously important for the Colts because it keeps them in that running for the division, which is something that they're going to need because they're not playing very well at all. They've got a lot of injury problems right now. Quarterback play wasn't all that great. Matt Hasselbeck stepped in, had 282 yards passing and a touchdown. Frank Gore with 53 yards running, had a fumble though. And right now it's just not looking good at all for Indianapolis. Jacksonville obviously not either because they're 1-3. Indianapolis 2-2. But their wins have not been convincing. Obviously, Andrew Luck with the shoulder problem didn't play. They're trying to hold him out for the next week's game, which will be, I believe, against Houston. So another important divisional matchup there. But it's going to be hard for them because their offense isn't clicking. The wide receivers that they made, the signings, Andre Johnson and a couple of the other guys, they're not clicking on offense. The defense isn't doing all that great, although holding anybody to 13 points, even though it is the Jacksonville Jaguars, is a decent enough day. But the offensive line isn't protecting the quarterbacks. They're obviously getting absolutely nothing out of the run game. And they've got to get something turned around because all their points came in the majority of the points came in the first half. They only scored 2 field goals in the second half. That's just not going to cut it against some of the better teams. But you're 2-2. Ultimately, you're still in the running for things. Some of the other games that went on yesterday, the Bears ended up defeating the Raiders 22-20. I took satisfaction out of this because underneath the Rams, the Bears are still one of my teams. Jay Cutler threw for 281 yards and 2 touchdowns. Not too bad, but he had a late pick that could have ended up costing them the game. Matt Forte had a Matt Forte day, 91 yards, 1 fumble. Not very good there, but the yardage is what helped out the team. Marcellus Bennett, 83 yards receiving and a touchdown. Chicago struggling though. They didn't get any points in the third quarter, settled for 2 field goals to win it in the fourth quarter because the defense stepped up and held them to 3 points in the fourth quarter. But Chicago, very similar to Indianapolis, is just kind of a mess. There's absolutely no defense, which has been the pride of Chicago. I mean, I understand that you won the game, but Oakland isn't exactly a good barometer. I mean, Oakland is better than they have been in the past, but they're still Oakland, and you allow 20 points to them. You step it up in the second half and only allow a field goal in the third quarter, a field goal in the fourth quarter. But right now it's just not looking good for Chicago. That's their first win of the year. Their offensive line, similar to Indianapolis, is having problems. Jay Cutler comes back in. The only reason that I liked the fact that he came back in and provided the team enough of a spark to win, he wasn't necessarily the reason they won, but they still won with him in there, is because so many people pile on this guy. And I understand he's worn out his welcome. He probably needs to not be the Chicago Bears quarterback anymore because I no longer feel that he has the offensive mind enough to be a good quarterback for them. He's just a gunslinger and he's got a hell of an arm. But outside of that, he's not a great quarterback. But people pile on him so much, and there were several people out there, not necessarily people that I know personally, but just I've seen comments that were ecstatic when he went down with the injury. And I don't like when people do that. I get it. I've been there. You've had similar situations. But the guy's a good enough quarterback. There's a reason he's a starter in this league, and there's a reason why his backup is not. So it's a good thing that Jay Cutler got the win there. Talking about some of the other games going on, the Texans against the Falcons. The Texans again continue their slide for whatever reason. They are 1-3 on the year, but they were going up against one of the best teams in the NFL so far. I mean, it has been unbelievable the turnaround that the Atlanta Falcons have pulled off. The central team was Hoyer. He had 232 yards passing, 2 touchdowns, only 27 yards, though, and a touchdown for Chris Polk. He was the leading rusher for the Texans. That's not going to get it done. Denarius Hopkins, 157 yards receiving. Not bad there. Matt Ryan, 256 yards and a touchdown. And the Atlanta Falcons just spreading the ball all around. Everybody was just doing something different for this team. They put up 21 points in the second quarter, 14 in the third quarter. Not too good in the first and fourth, but they had put up enough in those middle sections to really take the Texans out of the game. Texans did not score until the fourth quarter. They did put up 21 points, but by then the game was pretty much out of reach. Kind of useless there. The Chiefs drop another game. They lose 36-21 to the Bengals. Andy Dalton had 321 yards passing and a touchdown. Alex Smith, 386 yards. Now, granted, the Chiefs were behind most of the game, so that's the reason for a lot of that passing yardage. You're not going to see those numbers generally from Alex Smith, but he didn't throw for a touchdown. Jamal Charles had 75 yards rushing, but he did not run for a touchdown. Jeremy Maclin had 148 yards receiving, but he did not catch a touchdown. So it just wasn't all that great of a day for the Kansas City Chiefs, as they got 3 points in the first quarter, 9 in the second quarter, 3 in the third quarter, 6 in the fourth quarter to ultimately add up to 21. Cincinnati didn't have a great day, but they're still undefeated. 14 points in the first quarter, 15 in the third, 7 in the fourth. Enough to get the job done, and that's basically how that game went. The Packers weren't all that impressive. They beat the 49ers 17-3, but it was kind of one of those days you just get the job done. 224 for a touchdown for Aaron Rodgers, Eddie Lacy for 90 yards, and the Packers undefeated as well. They're pretty much going to run away with the NFC North. The Browns, again, with another Browns performance. They come close, but they just can't pull it off. They lose 30-27 against the Chargers. Josh McCown, 356 yards, 2 touchdowns. Pretty good day for him. Phillip Rivers, though, pretty much equaled that with 258 yards and 3 touchdowns. And basically that was kind of the difference, just a little bit extra in the passing game for the Chargers, and the defense couldn't quite step up just enough for Cleveland, so they sit at 1-3. The Broncos beat the Vikings 23-20. Again, not a great day for Peyton Manning. He had 213 yards, a touchdown, 2 interceptions. He's not looking good in that category. Teddy Bridgewater for the Vikings ended up with 269 yards and a touchdown. Not bad. 81 yards for Adrian Peterson for a touchdown. Ronnie Hillman with a big rushing day. He was the superstar yesterday, carrying the load for that Broncos offense. 11 carries, 103 yards and a touchdown. Denver stays undefeated. They're getting the job done. Just enough defensively, just enough offensively. Minnesota falls to 2-2. The Cowboys lost to the Saints in overtime, 26-20. The Cowboys are just absolutely decimated. They had another guy go down with an injury yesterday, in addition to Tony Romo, in addition to their tight end, who might be playing but is still injured. They've got some receiver issues. The offensive line has injuries. The Cowboys are just a mess. They still came close to pulling off the victory. Brandon Whedon had 246 yards and a touchdown, but Drew Brees was not to be outdone. 359 yards and 2 touchdowns. Dallas falls to 2-2. New Orleans gets their first win of the year. The Lions will play the Seahawks on Monday Night Football. But let's talk about the main game from my perspective. The St. Louis Rams took down the Arizona Cardinals in a result that really nobody expected. I think the way that the Rams had lost their last 2 games against Washington and then against the team escapes me now, but they had lost their last 2 games and not in good fashion either. And the offense just looked absolutely terrible. I don't think anybody expected 24 points to be put up on the board. Now, Nick Foles wasn't amazing, but he got the job done, and that's the important thing. 171 yards, 3 touchdowns, which is probably more than he's had in a couple games combined this year. Carson Palmer, 352 yards, 1 touchdown and 1 interception. The main talking point, though, is Todd Gurley. 146 yards, could have scored a touchdown, but he used his brain, showed his incredible intelligence, which is one of the main reasons that the St. Louis Rams drafted him. He was rushing down the sideline, could have put his body into a defender, might have risked losing the football, could have scored, though, on the other side of that coin, but instead he slides down, lets some more time take off the clock. Basically, he knew he had the first down. He was well past the first down. He had rushed for about 20 yards on that run, at least by that point, by the time that he went down, but he knew the situation. The St. Louis Rams had already had it wrapped up once he got the first down. Don't risk losing the football. Don't risk making some sort of boneheaded play to try to get yourself a statistic. You've already got 146 yards. Yes, you'd love to get the touchdown for fantasy reasons, maybe, if nothing else, but win the game. Win the game for your team, and that's exactly what he did. Todd Gurley stepped it up. Is he going to be the player that the St. Louis Rams hope for? That's remaining to be seen. Everybody's calling this a coming out party for Todd Gurley. I don't necessarily want to go that far because it's one game. We've seen situations in the past where players have kind of gone off, had a great game, and then they kind of disappeared for the rest of the season. I think Todd Gurley will be an excellent running back. I think why they drafted him, as long as he can keep those legs healthy, that is the key, because anytime you have a knee injury, it seems to always kind of crop up. Maybe the other one has too much strain on it as it tries to compensate for the weaker one, and then you put that one under damage. But as long as he can stay healthy, I think he will be the running back that the St. Louis Rams want. But at this stage, if a St. Louis draft pick could live up to 50% of what St. Louis Rams fans have been sold about what they were getting, that would be an achievement in and of itself. So if Todd Gurley can be 50% of what they have told us he can be, he'll still be a pretty good player. That's still a monumental leap from where all the other St. Louis Rams draft picks have been on the offensive side of the ball. Defensively, they're stout, they're stacked. As long as they stay healthy, they can win games. The offense still needs to put up points. 24 points, given the Rams' defense, is probably enough. They held a team that was averaging in the 40s to 22. They didn't look great. They allowed a lot of yardage, but they stood up in the red zone, and that's the big thing. St. Louis Rams 2-2. They're going into Green Bay. Probably not going to be a win, but we didn't think Arizona was going to be a win either. So that's the one that could surprise people. Then you have a bye week. Then you have a favorable schedule. You have the Browns and the 49ers coming up at home. You're also going to see the Bears, the Lions, a lot of NFC North in there. Then you obviously get back into the division. But there are winnable games in there, and St. Louis could take advantage of that. They just need to keep the points rolling. If Todd Gurley can help them with that, so much the better. That is the view from the Midwest. What are your views on the games that happened yesterday? Comment, rate, and subscribe. Give us a thumbs up on Facebook or YouTube. But until the next time, I'll see you then.